I've been editing broadcast TV commercials for over 2 decades, and there's one thing that leveled up my career faster than anything else: sound design. So in this free course, I'm going to share 7 lessons that will help you polish your sound design so you can book higher end jobs faster than I did. You'll learn the philosophy behind great sound design, my 4-step sound framework I use on 6-figure commercials, how to find the perfect sound effects, and you'll watch me build a soundtrack from scratch on 3 different real broadcast projects. First, I'm going to show you the one thing you need to decide before you touch a single sound. How does the movie Oppenheimer grab you even in its quietest scenes? Most people think Oppenheimer's genius soundtrack is due to flashy technical effects. But after 20 years of editing broadcast TV commercials, I discovered that the key to cinematic sound boils down to 5 simple steps. So in this video, I'll show you what those steps are and how to master the art of sound design so your work finally starts attracting higher end clients. Here's the first thing you need to know, and it's actually something you need to stop doing. Editors make a big mistake. They dive right into a scene, start using various techniques, but without a clear goal in mind. How do I know this? That was me, my first few years as an editor. It wasn't until my first mentor showed me that editing is all about emotion and story that my editing changed and it kicked off my career. And that's exactly what we need to do here, even with sound design. So stop diving in without a plan. Instead, decide on a target emotion for your scene first, then use all of your editing skills and technique to reinforce that emotion. Let's see this in action. I'm going to play a clip from Oppenheimer, and as you watch it, I want you to try to figure out what emotion editor Jennifer Lam was targeting.
3 years, 4,000 people, $2 billion. If it doesn't go off, we're both finished.
I'm betting on 3 kilotons. Anything less, I won't get what it is.
What did Fermi mean by atmospheric ignition?
Well, we had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop. Setting fire to the atmosphere.
Why is Fermi still taking side bets on it?
Call it gallows humor.
It may be different for you, but for me, this scene is pure tension. Yes, the techniques matter, but only because of what they make us feel. Now that we have a target emotion, let's see how it can shape our other sound choices, starting with background ambiances. I always start with background ambiances because it provides a nice bed for the dialogue to sit in and it sets an emotional tone. Now, too many editors, when they're starting out, myself included, just use the production audio they're given. But if you really want to elevate your scene, you need to find those background ambiances that really elevate that emotional target. Take Oppenheimer, for example. In this scene, it's raining, so the background ambiances is a rainstorm or thunderstorm. But I guarantee you they didn't just pick any thunderstorm. They auditioned, who knows, hundreds of different sounds to find the one that brought out the most tension. So don't settle for what's already in your timeline. Try a few different background sounds and pick the one that pushes your scene toward the emotional target you picked in step 1. And once you've built that ambience bed, your dialogue will have a nice place to sit. So now let's shift to talking about a couple of things that will change how you think about dialogue. First, feel free to push and pull the placement of the dialogue, especially if it's not shown on screen. Need more energy? Tighten it up. Need more introspection? Add space. In this clip in Oppenheimer, for instance, the conversation moves really fast, and odds are the actors didn't deliver their lines at this speed on set. Take, for instance, these 2 lines. My guess is that it was trimmed in the edit because there's only an 8-frame pause between the 2 lines.
What did Fermi mean by atmospheric ignition?
Well, we had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop.
Here's another tip. When I started editing, I used to always pick the cleanest takes from actors or voiceover artists, and I would throw away the takes with little imperfections. But later in my career, I realized that sometimes it's those little vocal nuances or vocal quirks that make a performance seem authentic, just like this line from Matt Damon.
What did Fermi mean by atmospheric ignition?
Did you catch that? The little mouth noise he made before he delivered his line? I think that really brings an authenticity, and I think it builds tension as well. So don't neglect that when you're choosing takes in your edit or when you're working on your sound design. You might be wondering why we haven't talked about music yet. Well, I like to build the emotional base with ambience and dialogue first. Since music is so powerful when it comes to emotion, I find that if I start with it in my timeline, it can sometimes trick me into thinking I've hit all my emotional targets when really I haven't done everything everything I can yet. So I like to get my ambience and dialogue working first, and then I shift to music, which is the next step. I think we often dive into a music search without a clear goal in mind. I'm guilty of this myself. We get overwhelmed, we lose our way, and it can be really frustrating. Now imagine starting your search with an emotional target in mind, like tension. And maybe you're searching in a music library where you can filter by instrumentation and you choose orchestral score.
Why is Fermi still taking side bets on it?
Call it gallows humor.
And now I'll show you how to elevate your sound even further as we add the small details that bring a scene to life. Just like with background ambience, don't settle for sound captured on set. Ask yourself, what specific sounds can I add to amplify the emotional target? In this Oppenheimer clip, you can hear the subtle rustle of clothes as the character gets up.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
And in addition to the thunderstorm and rain ambiances, there are strategically placed thunderclaps like this one, which fits perfectly between two lines of dialogue.
We're both finished. I'm betting on 3 kilotons. Anything less, I won't get what it is.
These tiny details make the world feel real, and the quality of the sounds themselves add to the tension. So go through clip by clip in your next edit and ask yourself, is there a sound I could add or swap out to elevate my target emotion? And even if a sound was recorded on set, like for instance, let's say there's a door knock in the scene you're working on, well, it might not hit the emotional target you're going for, and you might want to try replacing it with a sharper knock or a harder knock, depending on the mood you want. So experiment until each sound hits those emotional marks. Do you want to make your sound design feel like this?
We all know saving the world has its risks. So Bob from HR has enhanced our health benefits by switching us to Select Health.
I used to struggle to make my sound design pop until I created a 4-step sound design system I now use on broadcast TV commercials with budgets of $100,000 and higher. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what those 4 steps are so you can impress your clients with pro sound design every time without the stress. But before I share step 1, there's a mistake editors make that's stopping their sound from ever feeling broadcast ready. Early in my career, sound design was always an afterthought. Like a lot of young editors, I thought my job was to focus on the picture, and sound was something that would be handled by someone else later on. Then one day, I remember bringing a cut to an early mentor of mine, and I thought it was pretty polished. It had a music track. I think the picture cuts were pretty good. I was pretty confident in it, but he watched it, and when we got to the end, he simply said, "Hey, let me watch it again, but this time with the music off." And I was a little scared because I knew I had no other sound design beside that music track. So I turned the music off, we watched it again, and it absolutely fell apart. And my mentor knew it would. He was teaching me that our cuts have to work without a music track. In fact, music can lull us into thinking our sound design is good enough when it's really not. So the first thing you have to do in this process is to delete the music in your cut so you can really hear what's missing in your soundtrack. Now, let me show you what you should start with instead. And if you're tired of wasting hours trying to find the perfect sound effects, download my free sound effects search term guide at the link in the description. Step 1. Once I got serious about sound design, I realized it was at least of equal importance as picture, and the older I get, the more I'm convinced that sound is actually more important than picture. So years ago, I started asking myself this simple question every time I brought a new shot into my timeline. What is the sound of the shot? And usually it starts with background ambience. Even if your clip comes with audio attached, it's rarely what you need to make your video come alive. So before I touch anything else, I want my shots to live in a believable soundscape. For example, here's a spot I edited, and the world is a superhero layer. So as soon as I asked what's the sound of these shots, I'm thinking of an interior filled with high-tech hums and maybe beeps. Here are those shots with only the ambience turned on. So step one is to build out your ambience. And that's a great first step in bringing your soundtrack to life, but your sound is still not broadcast ready until you do this. Step two, once the ambience is in place, I move on to dialogue. And here's why I don't start with dialogue. I like to give my dialogue or voiceover a bit of context of the world it's living in, and by building out that ambience, it really helps with that. So once I start cutting my dialogue, I'm basically trimming out any unwanted noises between words or phrases. But every time I make a cut, I'm left with a silent gap. And what you want to do is fill those with room tone. So instead of letting your dialogue or voiceover editing fall to silence, use room tone to fill those spaces so the edits aren't noticeable. Here's that scene again with just dialogue and room tone.
We all know saving the world has its risks. So Bob from HR has enhanced our health benefits by switching us to Select Health.
So step two is to edit your dialogue and add room tone where necessary. Now you're ready to bring the scene to life. And unfortunately, this is a step that a lot of editors skip. Step three. In step one, we asked the question, what is the sound of the shot, to help us build out the background ambience. Now let's ask that same question to help us find specific sound effects that can bring each moment to life. Check out this frame. So I see a superhero's cape. That could definitely make a sound like a whoosh sound or a flowing cloth sound. I also noticed the main character is walking, so we could have some footsteps. And then here, her hands hit the table pretty hard. So that could also be a sound that we look for. So let's check out the cut and watch how I layered in each of these sounds. First, the cape, then the footsteps, and finally her hands hitting the table. Now, each of these sounds on its own may not seem very important, but together they really add up and bring this scene to life. And now let's watch it again with the dialogue and the ambience also turned on.
We all know saving the world has its risks. So Bob from HR has enhanced our health benefits by switching us to Select Health.
So step three is to add your specific sound effects to key moments. And if you want to save hours searching for sound effects, download my free sound effects search term guide at the link in the description. But there's still one last crucial step to have a broadcast ready soundtrack. Step four. So I had you delete or mute your music at the start so you could make sure your soundtrack was working in a few other areas. And now that we have that sound design built up, we can experiment with music. And the key to finding the perfect music track is always to start with an emotional target in mind. What do you want the audience to feel in this moment? For this scene, I wanted the audience to feel excitement right out the gate, like they're watching a big Hollywood superhero movie. And here's the opening scene with just the music track. And if I'd started with this big booming music track, it might have overwhelmed everything else, and I might have gotten lazy and not built out the other sounds that I really think make it all work. So here's the final opening scene with everything turned on.
We all know saving the world has its risks. So Bob from HR has enhanced our health benefits by switching us to Select Health.
So step four is to add music that evokes your target emotion. Have you ever spent hours searching for that perfect sound effect for your edit only to settle on something mediocre? The problem is likely with how you're searching. I've been a pro editor and sound designer for over 20 years, and today I'm going to show you 3 strategies to unlock better sound effects for your projects. Stick around to the end because I have a free guide for you that'll really save you when you're feeling stuck. Let's dive in. Why does it feel like you can't find the sound effect you need even when you're typing exactly what you're imagining? Well, back in the day, the most popular sound libraries came on hard drives or CDs. I'm dating myself here, and they were meticulously organized, but not necessarily for modern searches. They relied on categories with names like footsteps, doors, cars, impacts, and animals. The naming wasn't about creativity, it was about functionality. So if you search for something like old staircase, you might miss out because the sound you're looking for might be labeled wooden steps fast or creak slow. Let's take a look at the categories in one of the classic sound effects libraries called Hollywood Edge. Okay, we have things like nature ambiances, birds, animals, wind, water, rain, fire, cars, traffic sirens, guns, explosions, fights, body falls. You get the idea. These categories are aimed to help you functionally find what you're looking for. They're not necessarily the most creative. The first strategy is to think like the people who organized these classic libraries. Instead of describing the scene as you see it, use basic universal terms. Also, start broad and then refine from there. For example, instead of starting with something like building explosion, just start with explosion and see what comes back. Now you might be thinking, a term like explosion will yield far too many results. How do I narrow that down? I've had the same problem. I can remember searching for something like explosion on a project and just getting way too many results. So then I go to try to refine it by adding another word, like bomb explosion or car explosion or building explosion. But then I get too few results. Then I remembered that those original sound libraries often use simple adjectives to describe the sounds. So I typed in fast explosion and I got exactly what I was looking for. So when you want to refine a broad search term, try adding a simple adjective. Here are some to try. Big or small, soft or hard, small, medium or large, fast or slow. I think you'll be surprised at how often adding a simple adjective will help you find exactly what you need. Let's go back to that Hollywood Edge library so I can show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to click on wind. And here we go. All these different types of wind sound effects, and they are further refined by simple adjectives. We have light wind, medium wind, and even heavy wind. So you can see here, this is a very common naming system when you're searching for sound effects. What if the problem isn't your search term, but it's the way you're thinking about the sound? I was working on a project recently and I needed the sound of a metal spike coming up from the ground, sort of like a booby trap. I first searched for the word spike, but the sounds that came up weren't even close. And then I remembered, sound designers don't just use literal sounds, they build composites from multiple sounds. So I changed how I was thinking about the sound and I broke it up into two parts. I searched for metal fast and found exactly what was in my head for that part of the sound. And then I searched for impact heavy. And when I combined both of those into my sequence, it was exactly the sound I was imagining. The point here is to think in layers. If you can't find the exact sound you're looking for, break it up into two components and search for them separately. This is often how sound designers approach their craft, and it can be a game changer for editors. In order to help you unlock better sound effects, I created a free guide that lists some of these major categories and common search terms to help inspire you when you're feeling stuck. You can download it at the link in the description. When I was starting out as an editor, I remember always wishing that I could just sit behind a professional editor and look over their shoulder all day while they were working on a real project. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I wanted to invite you along as I show you track by track how I built the sound design on a recent commercial that I finished. There's a couple things about this spot that made it extra fun and challenging from a sound design perspective. First, the main character is 3D animated, so it relies heavily on sound to bring him to life. And second, it was actually shot on a virtual production stage. So the truck you're gonna see was actually sitting in a studio with a 70-foot LED wall behind it, playing the moving background. Because of those two things, when I brought in the project to my editing software, I literally had no sound to start. So let's take a look. To give you a sense of the story, I'm gonna show you the whole spot with just the dialogue. Here we go.
Are you okay? You seem upset. Turns out you were right. Our car was breaking down and we did need a new one with a loan from America First Credit Union. Me saying there was no hurry and to wait was wrong. Hey, on the bright side, we got to meet Huey.
Get your money working with a low-rate auto loan from America First.
Huey, help me!
I'm gonna mute the dialogue so we can go sound by sound. On this opening exterior shot, we wanted the sound to also have an exterior perspective. So let's listen to some of these sounds. First, we have a bus driver engine idle turning off sound. Then I actually have a An electric car driving fast, stopping wheels is the name of this sound. Kind of adds some airiness. Old beetle car. This is where we get in kind of the discomfort of this old truck. And then to add to that exterior sound perspective, we have some wind howling. And then finally, this last sound I want to show you on this opening shot is really important to the story. We wanted a sound that said car breaking down, and I think this did a pretty good job. It's like a gas release sound. Now the scene shifts to the interior of the truck. So these sounds should have more of an interior perspective. We'll start with this old car driving down the road. I really love that sound. It really feels like an old rough riding truck, which is really what we're going for to add to the comedy. This sound is called driving with windows open, interior perspective. I really like that sound. It really feels like you're in a rough riding truck. Now we have another truck. This is a Dodge military truck driving fast. Let's see what this sounds like. I think some of the acceleration sounds in that add a really nice layer. And then let's check out driving interior perspective, air conditioning, engine rattling sound. Just another nice layer. And just to be clear, I do expect a lot of these to make it into the final sound mix, but sometimes I'm actually giving the re-recording mixer different options, so they can kind of pick and choose what works best. And I think in this case, they might not use all 5 of these sounds, but they might use a few of them. We'll just have to wait and see when we hear the final sound mix at the end. So in addition to those ambiances, now we want to add some specific sounds that really emphasize the discomfort. So let's take a listen. Okay, here we have some wooden bed kind of creaking. Let's hear what this sounds like. So that's kind of a cool sound to play during her close-up. You can really hear the sound of her weight shifting. And then down here we have a rusty metal hinge squeak. Let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, subtle but pretty cool. And then we bring back the metal hinges on one of these shots later in the commercial. Let's take a listen. Now let's check out my favorite part of this little story that had some really cool opportunities for sound design. Let's listen to these 3 tracks of paper sounds I brought in to really bring the bill to life. And now let's check out the impact sound of him hitting the windshield. And then as soon as she starts rolling down the window, we wanted a big whoosh of wind to motivate him flying up against the windshield. Let's take a listen to some of these sounds. Here's an extreme climate thunderstorm ambience. Here's an airy whoosh. That really gave me the impression that air was swooping in. I really like that one. Here's a winter freezing, howling, gusting. Let's take a listen. Okay, and now let's get into the actual sound of her rolling down the window. Out the window, car manual window opening. Let's take a listen. That one had a nice thunk to it, but I actually used multiple sounds to make this work, so let's keep going. Here's a car window opening and closing manually. Okay, in that one you can kind of hear the whole motion, which is nice. Here's some squeaking that adds to it. And then let's check out one more. Another nice thunk. Let's hear all of those together. Now let's take a look at the very last shot so I can show you some of the paper sounds and the ambiances that I used there. Okay, first we have this poster sheet rolling, handling sound effect. And these ambiances are mostly repeats for what you heard in the previous shots. So I'm going to show you them all at once. And last but not least, we wanted to add some music coming from the truck stereo. This is known as diegetic music. That means it's coming from inside the world of the film and the characters can hear it. And then during the art card, we have non-diegetic music, which sounds like this. And before I play the final mix, I have to give a huge shout out to director Scott Rice. He is ultra talented, and it was so fun to be a part of bringing his vision to life. And of course, the re-recording mixer, David Bewley at Pony Sound in Austin, Texas, who just made this sound fantastic. Here it is.
Are you okay? You seem upset. Turns out you were right. Our car was breaking down and we did need a new one with a loan from America First Credit Union. Me saying there was no hurry and to wait was wrong. Hey, on the bright side, we got to meet Huey.
Get your money working with a low-rate auto loan from America First.
Huey, help me!
The fastest way to level up as a video editor is to level up as a sound designer. I've been a pro editor for over 20 years, and today I'd like to invite you into my edit suite so you can watch me sound design a scene live. And please stick around to the end because I'm going to share a tip I haven't seen anywhere else. Here's our scene. This is from a public service announcement that I edited, demonstrating the physics of the impact of a car crash when you're not wearing your seatbelt. Pretty powerful stuff, and gives us an opportunity for some really cool sound design. Here's my first tip. Instead of just creating one version of the sound design, I like to create two at the same time. So I'm going to copy my clips over. Now, as I search for sounds, I can create two distinct versions that I can either combine at the end, kind of the best of both versions, or I can send two distinct versions to my collaborator and get their feedback, which I find to be very effective. I have Artlist open. That's what I'll be using for sound effects today. You might have sound effects on your hard drive, or you might use another subscription service. I love Artlist because it's searchable, and I find their sound effects to be very high quality. Then I have a Finder window where all my Artlist files will automatically download, and then my sound effects folder where I want my media stored. Where do I start with sound design? Well, I like to start with an overall ambience. We can see here that the shots are in a city, in a downtown. We're up high. I do see cars in the background. The city streets are empty. So I'm thinking I might search for city street ambience. And let's see what we've got here. Okay, that's a pretty busy street. Probably a little too busy for our purposes. Okay, that's a lot more subtle. I really like that one. So I'm going to download it. You'll see it pop up in my downloads folder. Here's another one that I think is possible. So I'm going to download that too. And now as an alternate option, I'm thinking just like a subtle wind in the background. So I'll do light wind. Kind of like that first one. We'll put the wind on one of these, chop it up. And I think I'm going to use this ambiance here. Okay, and great. I'm gonna slip and slide this to a better part. And let's see what we got. Okay, gives us a nice base. Something to work with. Okay, so now that we have a nice bit of ambience, let's look at our shots. So we have a nice button press there, and I'd like to give that a sound to bring it to life. So I'm going to come over to Art List. I'm just going to search for button and see what pops up. Okay. That's not bad. I kind of like that too, if we want to give it as if it's making a noise when you press it. Okay, so this gave me an idea. This file's called switch, so I'm going to change my search to switch. I really like the sound of that one. I think I'm definitely going to use that. So let's drag it to my folder. I'm going to put that over here. We'll line them up later. And let's hear these again. Okay, let's do the beep as an alt. Let's put that over here. And again, we'll line it up at the end. That was pretty straightforward. I saw a guy pressing a button. I looked up button. I found a sound of a button. But a lot of times with sound design, you have to be creative with your search terms because the perfect sound might actually have nothing to do with the visual. For instance, the next sound is this contraption where the dummies are situated falling over. So I might search for the term hydraulic. And let's see what that brings back. Okay, I really like that. It sounds like a machine starting. Okay, that's kind of more intense, but I think that's a good second option. So we have a sound of the machine, which is sort of a hydraulic sound, but I kind of want a sound of the dummy actually making some noise. So I might just type in object moving and see if we get lucky. Little sounds like that can be very effective. I'm going to download that one. I like the metallic nature of that. That's an interesting, subtle sound. I think I'm going to try these two. Put that there, put that there. We can stay cleaned up in our bins here. You see when I drag stuff over, it puts stuff in the root, but I can select it and get it nice in our SFX folder. And let's keep moving here. So the dummy is flying through the air. So I want some sort of gust of wind or some rustling of fabric to bring that to life. So let's look for wind gust. Pretty subtle, but I like that. Let's check out a few more before I download one. I really like that one. It really feels like something flying through the air. That one's kind of cool too. Pretty intense, but we can turn it down in the mix. Okay, so they're downloading. Bring them right in. I'll trim this up. And bring this over here. You know, another sound that I have in my mind is a sound of a flag flapping in the wind. that might give me exactly what I need. So I'm going to look for flag. That's exactly what I was looking for. It really sounds like wind on fabric. A little too high pitched for me. Okay, that's another nice one. So I'm going to grab that. And let's bring them into our folder, stay nice and organized, and drag it over. And we can clean this up a little. Now the fun part, the crash. So let's start really basic by looking up a crash. A little too much. Okay, I kind of like that. I like the end of that. I probably wouldn't use the car tire screech, but we can cut that off. So I'm going to grab that too. Another part of this shot that I want to highlight with sound is the debris that comes off the dummy after it crashes. I'm just going to search for the word debris and see what comes up. I really like that, so I'm going to download it. I like the end of that sound as another option, so I'll grab that too. Now for effect, this edit shows the crash twice from 2 different angles, so we could put in 2 different crash sounds on one of the versions and see if we like that. I'm also going to look up the word impact to see if I can find a nice low-end impact to put under the crash. That's a little much. Okay, so these are not what I'm looking for. I'm going to change this search to body fall. That is pretty close to what I was thinking of. So I'm going to download that. Another good one. I'm thinking on my alternate version, I'll include a glass break or shatter on the second crash and see how that sounds. That's exactly what I was thinking. All right, so let's get in here and line some things up and level some things out. Okay, so the ambience is on track 1. We have this button sound. I'll line up here. Okay, then we have the machine releasing. I'm going to let it play out like this. And turn down that button, make it really subtle. Okay, now we have our nice wind sounds. I really like that. I'm going to move it over right when it comes out of the seat there. And when you see the gain go up and down, I'm just using a hotkey to adjust my gain. I didn't really like the placement of the button. Okay, that's cool. All right, so what is this? Some wind. I kind of like the front of this before it gets too crazy. I'm going to mix this wind in low underneath this sound. Okay. All right, so we have a crash. Now remember I said I was going to cut out the tire squealing? It looks about right here. We're going to line this up right on impact. Okay, that's pretty cool. And what else do we got here? That's one of the body hits I found. So I'm going to mix that right on the crash. And then what is this sound? Nice debris. Okay. Looks like the debris wants to be mixed in right here. And I actually heard a little of those tire screeches. Okay, I think all the tire screeching is gone. Line this up. Okay, I heard a little beep at the end of this clip, so I'm gonna take that out. And then we're gonna duplicate it and hear it again from a different angle. All right, that is one version. I could definitely level it out a little more, but let's look at our next version. Okay, so we just want one of these buttons. And I want it to make the sound right on the button. Okay. It's cool. What do we got here? Ooh, the cool machine sound. I'm just going to use part of it. And I actually want it to start coming in before we see it. So a little sound advance. Great. See what we got here. Okay. It's kind of the sound of an object. I might want to hear that on the release of the dummy and just mix it really low. Okay, I kind of liked that. Some serious wind action. Just going to grab this part of it. I'm going to add a fade into that. And I want the wind to make noise right up until the impact. Let's see what we got here. Okay. I think I'm just going to use the second half of this. Yeah. I'm going to mix this quietly under the wind. Oh, I kind of like this bigger part. Okay. Okay, that's our first impact sound. Line that up. Nice impact. Just need one. And then I was going to repeat these impact sounds, but I was going to add some glass. So move that over. And at the beginning of this video, I mentioned I was going to give you a tip that I haven't seen a lot of places. And that is, when you're an editor getting into sound design, figure out how to turn on subframe editing. In my case, in Premiere, I have a hotkey for that. So you'll see the time code on my timeline has now changed. So instead of moving my sound effects one frame at a time to line them up, I can actually be very exact with my placement. And that works especially well on these impacts. I want them to be right on the frame. So let's zoom in and adjust them with subframe editing turned on. So this is where I want them to start. So you see how fluid I can move this impact, and I can get it right there. I can also zoom in far past where you usually can zoom in. So let's listen to this again. So that impact is right on, and these little changes really add up. All right, so we want that right here. Let's quickly line these up. I'm going to come a little closer. Much better. Let's do it on our other version as well. Okay. All right, there are two versions. And now let's take a look at what we made. Today I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. through the power of sound design. I've been a pro editor for over 20 years, and I'd like to invite you into my edit suite so I can show you every single sound that I use to bring this broadcast commercial to life. We'll listen to the background ambiances, dialogue, specific sound effects, and music. Stick around to the end and I'll reveal the final sound mix. Let's get into it. When I'm working on the sound for a commercial, I like to start with background ambiances. That way my dialogue has a nice bed to sit in. So let's just go one by one and see what I have here. I'm going to solo my first ambiance, and let's check it out. So that's the first bed of ambience I found for this desert camping scene. In fact, the ambience is called Binaural Desert at Dawn. Let's take a look at the next ambience. So that was a nice fire sound. You'll see we have this nice crackling fire through the entire spot. So that really gives a nice feel. And the next bed of ambience I have are cicadas, crickets, which are always great for a night scene, especially an outdoor camping scene. So let's take a listen to those soloed. I have one more sound effect to show you as part of the general ambience, and it's actually a specific sound effect of a wolf howling to set the stage for this desert camping scene. Let's take a listen. For some projects, you might find one bed of ambience that works great for the whole spot, and you only need one audio file. But in general, I find it best to layer multiple ambiances to give a more realistic feel. Now I'm going to show you all the ambience layers together. Check it out. Now it's time to add some dialogue. We have 4 characters in this commercial. We have the human camper, his $5 bill companion, and then we have the guy driving the ATV along with the $10 bill. And obviously, the bills are 3D animated, so we had a couple different options for bringing them to life. For the main bill, the $5 bill, we used a voice actor, so that was recorded in a voice studio and sent to us. But for the vocalizations of the $10 bill, we actually used sound effects from a sound effects library to bring him to life. And the 2 human characters were recorded on set. So that's what we're working with. First, I'm going to solo the $10 bill in the ATV.
Hey!
And now, let me add in the vocalizations of the other guy in the ATV.
Hey!
And now I'll add in the male camper.
Hey!
Mike seems to be having more fun with his money.
And now I'll add in the dialogue of the $5 bill.
Hey!
Mike seems to be having more fun with his money.
Really? Because you've got your book, and I'm roasting wieners. And marshmallows. Yeah, they're probably having more fun. S'more dog?
But there's actually one more piece of dialogue, and that's the voiceover for the end art card. And this was also recorded in a voice actor studio and sent to us. So let me show you that section.
Get your money working with a low-rate RV or power sports loan now at America First.
What seems like a pretty simple broadcast commercial actually has 5 different voices going on that each require specific attention. So we have our nice bed of background ambiances, and we have all of our dialogue organized and edited. Now let's move into specific sound effects. So I'm going to turn off the dialogue and ambiances so you can really hear what's going on, and I'm going to solo the next track, which includes 3 unique sounds. First, the marshmallow catching on fire, then the marshmallow being blown out by the bill, and finally the book closing. The first 2 were from a sound effects library, and the last one of the book closing was actually recorded on set. Usually I would replace that with the sound of a book closing really clean from a sound effects library, but the on-set recording actually turned out really nice. So let's check these out. I really like how the book close gives a nice punctuation to the end of the spot. I'm going to solo our next track, which also includes 3 unique sound effects, all having to do with the ATV. So first we have the ATV sound of wheels on gravel from a sound effects library, and then you're going to hear an ATV revving off screen as it prepares for the jump, and then finally a high revving engine sound to add some intensity to this shot. Let's take a listen. Pretty cool. Now I'm going to solo this next track, which is all about what the ATV is doing at the beginning of the spot. And this took some detailed editing because I wanted to make it sound like the ATV was speeding up to the campers, slowing down as they said hello, and then speeding off. Here it is. This next track has, you guessed it, more ATV sounds. I really wanted to go all out in bringing the ATV to life. So we have more wheels on gravel, and then we have a cartoony whoosh for the jump, and then again, more wheels on gravel. Take a listen. And our next track has another ATV sound. To go along with that cartoony whoosh, I have a ATV jump sound. This next track is more ATV engine sounds to be mixed in. And then we have some wind sounds. Then a sound that really makes it feel like the ATV is landing the jump. Then I have a little sound of the metal bars rattling. And finally, some impact of the ATV on dirt. Now I'm going to solo all the ATV sounds so you can hear them together. This next track is a really fun one. Throughout this campaign where we were dealing with 3D animated dollar bills, I wanted to bring those bills to life with paper sounds. So this last track is all about paper. Let's listen. Subtle, but it's those little details that really bring spots to life. And last but not least, we have some music. If this was actually score for the spot, I probably would have mixed and leveled this in earlier, maybe after the ambiances, but because it was just for the art card, I saved this for the end. So let's listen to the music that plays over the art card. Before we watch all of my sound design together and the final sound mix, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the roles of sound designer and sound mixer. My role as sound designer on a project is to find all the right sounds to bring a story to life. In my case, I'm always collaborating with a sound mixer on broadcast commercials. So I transfer all the sounds in the form of an AAF file and a QuickTime reference movie to the sound mixer, in this case, David Bewley at Pony Sound. Big shout out to him. And he brings it into Pro Tools and performs the final mix. And that includes fine-tuning all of the audio levels, effects like equalization and compression, especially on dialogue, special effects like echoes and reverbs, panning, which involves moving sounds in the stereo field left or right, and then final broadcast leveling so that my spots pass quality control before they air on television. Now, there is definitely some overlap. As sound designer, I'm obviously doing some pre-mixing, especially when it comes to leveling, because I don't want anything to be so out of whack that it's distracting. And then the sound mixer might replace some of my sounds. Say they have better paper sounds than the ones I found, or a more compelling ATV sound that they want to put in. So there's definitely some overlap and a collaboration between the two roles. And to give you an idea of the difference, I'm going to play the whole spot with my final sound design, and then I'll play it again with the final sound mix that went to broadcast. Here it is.
Hey!
Mike seems to be having more fun with his money.
Really? Because you've got your book, and I'm roasting wieners and marshmallows. Yeah, they're probably having more fun.
Get your money working with a low-rate RV or power sports loan now at America First.
S'more dog?
And now the final mix.
Mike seems to be having more fun with his money.
Really? Because you've got your book, and I'm roasting wieners and marshmallows. Yeah, they're probably having more fun.
Get your money working with a low-rate RV or power sports loan now at America First.
S'more dog?
If you want to create more impactful edits, here's my advice. Spend as much time on sound as you do on picture. I've been a pro editor for over 20 years, and today I'm going to sound design a scene live so you can see my exact process. Please stick around to the end for a special sound design tip. We have a really fun scene today. It's a boy knocking out a giant spider monster with an empty bottle. This is from a commercial I edited almost 10 years ago, and I remember being so excited to work on it. It's not every day you get to design sound for a giant spider monster in an apocalypse. I've removed the original audio so that we can create something new together in real time. And here's my first tip. Instead of trying to create one perfect version, let's stay a little more loose and create two versions at the same time. This gives us a little more freedom to experiment. And if you're working with a collaborator, sending two versions to start is a great way to get the creative conversation flowing. So I'm just going to select this scene and copy it over here. Let's take a look at my layout. I'll be editing in Premiere Pro today, but these concepts will work with any editing software. And you'll see next to Premiere, I have a browser window with Artlist open, and that's where we will be sourcing our stock sound effects. And then I have two Finder windows open. One is the Downloads folder. This is where everything from my browser automatically downloads. And then I have my SFX folder, where I actually keep my media organized. I like to start my sound design with backgrounds. I'm going to search for the word apocalypse and see if we get lucky with some nice kind of post-apocalyptic ambience. That's actually pretty cool. Sometimes you do get lucky. I'm going to download that one. I don't love that one as much. That one's pretty interesting. I kind of love the screaming and yelling. It sounds pretty horrifying. Maybe we'll try that for our second version. Okay, to stay organized, I'm just going to drag these files to my SFX folder, and then I'm going to drag them straight in. I'm just going to rough it in. That'll be for the first, this will be for the second. I'm going to cut things in really rough to start until we have a nice collection of sounds we're happy with, and then we can do some detailed placement and leveling at the end. Next, I'm going to search for industrial ambience. Not quite what I was looking for. Okay, that's a machine, not what we're looking for. It's another machine. Okay, I kind of like that. I like the frequency of kind of the whirring background, and I like some of the reverberating noises that are coming up. So I'm going to grab that, and I think I'll just put it in our second pass. Just move it over to my SFX folder and drag it right in. You'll notice that the light in this scene is coming from a big fire. So I'm going to search for the word bonfire and see if we can get kind of a nice big, flamey, crackling fire sound to put in the background. That I really love. I'm going to get that one. That's a really nice one. Let's just rough these in. One sound that came to mind as I was watching these clips is like a wolf howl. So I want to search for one of those and see if we can find a spot for it in one of our versions. That's the one I was looking for. Nice classic wolf howl. I think I'm going to put it in at the beginning of the first version. I'm going to stack it over here. Now, instead of music, I kind of want some sort of droning musical ambiance. And we can actually, in Artlist, search under filters and genres for something called atmospheres. The first one's called Fright Night. Okay, that's actually pretty awesome. Sometimes you get lucky. So I'm going to download that one. That's pretty intense, but might be cool to try on the second version. I love the convenience of dragging sounds straight over from my Finder window to the timeline, but you can see there's a little cleaning up to do in the project window. Okay, now we're good. Now that we have some nice backgrounds built up, let's get into some specific sounds. The first one I want to search for is a roar for the spider monster. That's pretty awesome. Another awesome one. That's not quite what I was looking for. Okay, I really like that sound. I think it might be cool mixed with one of the first two. So I'm going to try layering two of those in the second version, as you can see here. On this shot, you'll see the boy throwing the empty bottle, and what I want to find are some close noise. So you would almost hear his jacket making a noise as he throws. So let's search for that. That could work. We'll try it. I like that quick one in the middle, so we'll try that on the second version. Now let's get a bottle break sound for the impact of the bottle on the spider. That's great. Another option, a little higher frequency. Awesome. I also want a big impact sound for when the spider falls to the ground. For this, I usually search for something like body falls. I like the quality of that. Not loud enough. That's really nice. I think I like these as well. Sometimes it's good to double these up. Try these two over here. And these over here. We have the spider fall, but then the spider sort of dies. So I want kind of a dying sound. Let's see what happens when I search for dying. That is really cool. I'm going to try that one, and I think that first one. Let's try those two. The last shot of our scene here is of a man yawning. Now, typically we would record the actor yawning on set and use that production audio in the final sound design. But since we don't have that here, we're going to search for a yawning sound effect and just see how close we can get in syncing one up. Let's take a look. Let's try that one. And let's try that breathy one and see if it matches up better. Let's quickly clean up our project panel and then start fine-tuning these sounds. The S on my timeline stands for solo, so it's only going to play the tracks I have soloed, which in this case are the first ambiances we put on track 1. Let's listen and see what we have. That's pretty cool. Let's see what version 2 sounds like. Okay, I think I found a section of that that's pretty cool. I'm just going to lower it quite a bit. Now I'm going to solo track 2 and see what we have here. That has a nice quality to it, and I want to hear both of these together on version 2. Just going to level these out a little bit. And let's see what we have on track 3 soloed. Very cool. That's the wolf howl we wanted to try out on version 1. I like how it comes in right at the head of the scene, but I'm just going to lower it. Let's see what we have next on version 2. Ah yes, our fire sound. Very cool. Our second fire sound got lost, so I think I'm going to grab it from over here. Okay, great. I got that fire sound I had missed, cut in, and I'm trying to keep these organized on the same tracks. So fire sounds are both on track 3. Okay, very cool. Let's listen to what we have on track 4. Okay, these are those cool drone sounds we found. Very cool. They just need to be mixed a lot lower. I'm using keyboard shortcuts to raise and lower volume. So I have Command T nudges volume down by 1 decibel, and Command Y on my keyboard raises volume by 1 dB. Well, that was very cool, and not a bad placement for that to start. Let's see what we have on version 2. You can see I have some syncing to do here. Let's listen to these 2 monster roars together. I really like that. Let's see if we can get this close noise to work. It can be pretty subtle. I like this one a lot more in version 2. Let's try to sync it up. Very subtle. I like how that one worked out, but we'll leave both in so we can hear them all at the end. We're going to sync up the bottle break in version 1. Okay, now we have these nice body impacts. So let's sync these up for when the spider falls to the ground. We have 2 more over here. Let's sync them up. Pretty cool. And this track, I think, was the monster dying. And I kind of want it to happen when his body settles at the very end. And now we have that yawn. Let's see if we get lucky and can sync these up. Just going to do some general leveling. I'm going to put the dying sound on the impact. I think that might work a little better. I'm going to save the howl for the end, and I'm going to get rid of the dad's yawn, which I don't think quite works. Let's get that close noise to pop through a little more. Okay, that's getting somewhere. I think the bottle needs to come up. This is kind of overwhelming. I'm going to mute that drone we put in. I'm going to raise the roars a little bit. Raise up that bottle. And same here, I'm going to put the dying sound on the impact and raise it up quite a bit. Sync up the yawn a little. Let's hear it a little more. This one I believe a little more, so we'll leave that in. Before we listen to the two versions we created, I have a tip for you. Whenever you're working on something with visual effects or even a motion graphic that hasn't been completed yet, I highly recommend starting your sound design. Not only will the sound help you sell your edit, but the sounds might actually inform the motion graphic animation or the animation of a giant spider monster in this case. So get started on your sound design early. If you made it this far, you're probably very serious about sound design. So if you want to take what you learned today and supercharge it by working directly with me on high-end spec commercials for your show reel, click the link in the description to check out my editing program. You now have all the sound design skills you need to go pro, but it's still easy to get stuck in a cycle of being overworked and underpaid. So watch this video next to learn the 5 things blocking you from booking high-end editing jobs and how to fix them. Happy editing.